Greetings, everyone. This is Mountain Earth Witch, and now I'm going to talk about why peace silk is not peaceful and its animal cruelty. So first, a little brief summary of how silk is made. Silk is made out of harvested cocoons of silkworms that are painfully killed in the process. The silk production starts with female silk moths, most often Bombyx mori, that's the breed, laying their eggs, about 200 to 500 eggs each. The eggs hatch after about a week, get fed with mulberry leaves, and eventually go through 5 stages in which they shed their skin and grow in size. At the end of the 5th stage, the silkworm caterpillar starts spinning and sealing its cocoon and then morphs into a pupa. The transformation into a moth takes just about 1 week. In nature, the next step for the moth would be secreting a yellow fluid which would cause the cocoon to open, allowing the moth to climb out of it, attracting a male to mate, and then the process would start all over again. In the silk industry, it's something else entirely. In order not damage the cocoon's silk threads, they are harvested while the silkworms are still in the pupa stage. This prevents them from becoming a moth. This process is called stifling, and it is as awful as it sounds. The cocoons are boiled, steamed, or baked, resulting in undamaged silk thread, but a painfully killed silkworm. So is silk ethical? Silk is not an ethical fabric to wear. Not only it requires thousands of animals to die, but silk is also produced by workers who are often paid below a living wage, and child labor exploitation is also involved. The impact of silk production on the animals. As the silkworm has to experience a painful death by being boiled, steamed, or baked alive, silk cannot be considered an animal-friendly fabric. To make 1 kilogram of silk, about 6,600 silkworms need to die. That's 1,000 animals for 1 silk skirt. And yes, silkworms or insects in general are sentient beings. They possess a central nervous system, brain, and have the ability to experience pain. As we humans have domesticated silk moths, Bombyx mori, to produce fine silk, to optimize their silk production, we created a moth that is blind and unable to fly. She lays eggs only once and then she is killed. Her offspring are killed before they mature and grow into a moth. The rule of thumb is simple. If you need an animal to produce fabric, the animal is being exploited. The fashion industry sees animals as a commodity and not sentient beings that can experience stress or pain. The same applies to the silk industry, even if the animal happens to be an insect. The impact of silk production on people. As the silk production is a very labor-intensive process, it requires many workers. The silk industry employs about 1 million workers in China and 7.9 million workers in India, mostly in rural populations. Unfortunately, this opens the door for the exploitation of workers who are paid unfairly low wages, which are simply not enough to cover life essentials. And by workers, we also mean children, unfortunately. Human Rights Watch reported about the abuse of child slaves in the Indian silk industry. About 350,000 working children, some as young as 5 years old, boiling cocoons, hauling containers of mulberry leaves, and embroidering saris. These children work for 12 or more hours a day, 6.5 or 7 days a week, experience physical and verbal abuse. Their wages range from nothing at all to about 400 rupees, which is 6.28 euros a month. That being said, the exploitation of animals in the silk industry is not the only reason to shear away from silk. Is silk sustainable? Not at all. It is actually the single most environmentally unfriendly fabric despite its ability to biodegrade. Silk is even worse than the much demonized cotton used for using more water, being responsible for more water pollution and more greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, the Higg Materials Sustainability Index ranks the environmental impact of various fibers, from the production of raw fibers to fabrics, and silk scores the highest when compared to all other fabrics. This is due to its global warming potential, water usage, and pollution, as well as the use of fossil fuels. Silk farms need to be kept at a certain temperature and humidity, but silk is produced in Asian countries with hot climates, so the silk industry uses a huge amount of energy to keep the right temperature and humidity. Steam or hot air is used to dry cocoons after harvesting, which means even more energy is used in the process. The energy could be potentially provided by burning wood of mulberry trees, but it's most likely provided by a coal-fired plant. Thus, it seems that silk is not as sustainable as consumers might have heard. Is piece silk a better and ethical alternative? Piece silk is not a better or nor ethical alternative. Actually, it is responsible for even more deaths of caterpillars than regular silk production. Piece silk, also called Ahimsa, which means nonviolent. Just look at that. It's so deceiving, the title that they named that, Ahimsa. That should be abolished. Or Eri silk is commonly offered as a better and ethical alternative because the process of stifling is avoided and therefore the moths are able to climb out of the cocoons and breed. What often is forgotten to question is the fate that awaits the adult moths. As the farmers allow the moths to mate, the male moths are used again and again until their fertility decreases. Then they are no longer needed. Thus, they are just thrown away, left to experience a very slow death. The female moths are crushed and later examined whether they carry any diseases. If so, all their eggs are destroyed. Piece silk might be actually even worse than regular silk. There are several ethical inconsistencies in piece silk production. In short, piece silk causes more animals to die when you consider the whole picture. Just one female moth lays about 200 to 1,000 eggs. In some strains, the eggs require refrigeration, otherwise the offspring die in about 1 or 2 months. After refrigeration, they hatch and need to be fed right away. If not, they quickly die of starvation or dehydration. The final result, however, is the death of 200 to 300 embryos or hatching silkworms per moth for any amount that exceeds the needs of the next crop. How come? Well, the vast majority of silkworms raised for Ahimsa silk have several breeds per season. If you take, for instance, 20,000 cocoons, the next generation will result in about 2.5 million cocoons, and the next one in about 312 million cocoons. We could continue on, but one thing is clear. It is impossible to feed so many silk moths, so many offspring are left to die from starvation and dehydration. This means that instead of killing one pupa per cocoon, in case of the regular silk production, hundreds of caterpillars are killed. The theory behind piece silk is appealing. No wonder that many conscious consumers avoid silk but are comfortable with buying and wearing piece silk. We must admit the term itself is quite tempting. But the reality of the piece silk industry is not ethical nor peaceful. Even though the silkworms are set free from the cocoon, they are still met with a painful death afterwards. So to wear clothes that are ethical toward animals is to wear clothes that are animal-free. More ethical, sustainable, and vegan alternatives to piece silk. Tencel, lyocell, modal, or recycled synthetic fibers are great alternatives to silk as they meet the criteria of being a soft and shiny fabric with a luxurious feel. So good news, your clothes can shine and be more sustainable at the same time. So a little bit about Tencel and lyocell. Luxurious, softer than silk, stronger than polyester, biodegradable, and entirely made from wood, Tencel, the patented brand name of the lyocell fabric, is a more environmentally friendly alternative due to its closed-loop production. And what else here? That's about it. So that is the rundown on piece silk and silk in general. So once again, piece silk is animal cruelty. It's absolutely the deaths of thousands and millions of silkworms, and it's even more deaths than regular silk, so it's even worse. So both regular silk and piece silk are absolutely horrific operations. They need to be abolished. Everyone should boycott these industries. Boycott buying silk. Do not buy silk. It's the most it's the worst fabric. It's environmentally destructive. As it said, it was top on the list of environmental destruction of the fabrics. So yeah, I'm absolutely against it, and I wanted to share this information with all of you. Thanks for listening, and you all have a great day.